Okay, boys and girls, today I'm going to show you how to replace the ball joints on a 98 Cherokee. That's these things, in case you were wondering. Now this first step kind of depends on what kind of wheels you have. If you have the stock wheels, kind of like this, you're going to have to lift up your vehicle, take your wheel off, and continue on from what I'm about to say now. If you happen to have aftermarket wheels like me, and it has the center section kind of cut out, and you have access to the axle nut, then we're going to leave the wheel and the vehicle on the ground. We don't want to jack it up just yet. Begin by removing the cotter pin that goes through the axle shaft right here, and then you can remove this little piece right here, which kind of keeps the axle nut from moving around. Next, if you have an impact gun, well, good for you. That makes this job a hell of a lot easier. Unfortunately, I don't. So we're going to grab our 36mm axle nut socket, attach it to a breaker bar, and we're going to give it hell. Rotating it counterclockwise, of course. And if your axle nut is really seized on that axle shaft, kind of like how mine was, a little heat goes a long way to help loosen that thing up. When you get the nut off, don't forget there's actually a washer back in here too. So you got to get that out as well. Alright, with the axle nut off, now we can loosen up the lug nuts and jack up the vehicle and remove that tire. Alright, next on the agenda is to remove the brake caliper. We can do that by removing that bolt right there, that bolt right there. They're both 13mm bolts. And with those two bolts out, this thing should just be able to come off just like that. And now with the brake caliper off, we can now pull the brake disc off. Set that right there. Try not to have the outer disc laying on the ground or anything like that. We don't want to get contaminated with any type of grease. Okay, now we have the hub in all its rusty glory. And that's going to have to come off as well. To take that off, we have 3 bolts. However, it takes a very special kind of socket to get that off. This is a 12-point 13mm socket. Has to be 12-point because if you look closely at this bolt right here, I don't know how well you can see it, that is a 12-point bolt. If you try to use any other kind of socket on it, it may not get a well enough grip on it, and it'll probably just eat those threads up. And then you have a whole nother mess on your hand trying to tap that bolt out and drill it out and whatnot, and getting the hub off. So definitely worth the money. Just spend a few bucks and buy this special socket to get that hub off. Those 3 bolts out, if you're lucky, your hub will now just be able to slide on out. However, if you're unlucky, your hub will be completely seized onto the knuckle, and that's what I had that issue on the other wheel over there. And what you want to do with that is grab your mallet. You just want to tap all around the hub until it starts getting loose. You don't want to tap on one side too much, or else it'll kind of like bind. You just want to, tap all around the edges, kind of like when you're tightening up the lug nuts on a wheel. You don't want to tighten up one side too much, because then it'll kind of get all offset and whatnot. You just want to tap a little bit on each side till it pops out, just like that. Okay, now with the hub off the vehicle, the axle shaft should slide right out, just like that. Alright, the last thing we need to remove before we can get to the ball joints is the thing that's attached to the ball joints itself, the steering knuckle. So we've got a bolt right here and a bolt down here, as well as a couple of cotter pins. So we need to remove those 2 bolts. Alright, with those 2 bolts now off, grab your mallet, give this thing a nice good whack. There we go. Whack it enough times in the right spot, and the knuckle will come out. Get that ABS cord there. I don't have ABS anyway, so I don't really care about that cord. But there. Now everything is pretty much off of that side of the axle, we now have access to these nice, loose, oh man, look at this one. Whoo-wee! Yeah, definitely need to be changed out. So now that we have the knuckle off, we can now move on to the main event, taking out the ball joints. For that, we're going to need our ball joint press. This one I rented from AutoZone. It was 220 bucks, so it's an expensive son of a gun, but you know, you get your money back when you return it, so it's all good. Now we want to start by taking off this top ball joint first, and you'll see why after we take this out and start working on this bottom one. So let's first remove that dust seal and get access to the solid metal piece that's right here. And while we're at it, maybe wipe some of this grease off, just make it a little bit cleaner. So with this top ball joint, we're going to be pressing it up and out. So the pieces we're going to need are this receiving tube, which has to fit completely over the ball joint, but not, you know, hang over the edge of the axle right here. We need this adapter piece, which will fit right on top, and then this small piece, which will slide over the stud and meet nice and flush against this metal piece right here. Take this piece, the main C clamp, put it in like that, and screw this down until we get some tension. And now we're ready to get a socket and start turning this and pressing it up and out of the axle. There we go. Feels like it's loosened up quite a bit. Just like that. So with this bottom ball joint, it's pretty much going to be the same principle as far as removing it. However, instead of pushing it up and out, we're going to be pushing this one down and out. And we're going to be using the same tools, same attachments for this ball joint press. So we're going to want to get this piece, put it over the bottom part, making sure that the stud has the ability to go through this hole right here. We're going to take this piece right here, put it right on top, and then put the adapter plate on top of that. Now I said before it's important to have this ball joint out first, and the reason is so we can stick that piece up through that and have plenty of room to be able to actually use it. Couldn't do this if this ball joint was still in here. So now that we have this all set up, let's start pushing it out. There it goes. Out goes the weasel. There we go. She's out. So after you get both ball joints out, get a rag or something like that, just kind of wipe off any dirt or caked on grease that might be in these holes. And after that, all there really is to do is to start going in reverse direction and put the new ball joints in. Before we do that, I want to get some all-purpose grease and grease your piece. You want to make sure that it goes in nice and easy. We don't want any complications. Maybe grease the hole a little bit. And by the way, we do want to, when I say go in reverse direction, I really mean reverse direction. We want to put in the bottom ball joint in first. Now with this particular ball joint, which is a Moog, it has a greasable fitting right there. And it says to make sure that it's parallel with the front bump stop or steering bump stop right here, this little lump. So we're going to be putting it in pretty much like that. That way it's the most accessible to grease it when everything's back together. Now the attachments we're going to need to put this ball joint back in is the same receiving tube that we've been using. Make sure it's something that'll fit completely over this hole, or just, you know, as long as the ball joint fits completely in it, it's good. And then we're gonna not use this thing. We don't need this time. Instead, we're just gonna use the plain opening on the bottom of the C-clamp, because it fits perfectly like that. And you want to make sure that you're not going to be pinching any of the dust cover. If you're doing that, or if the dust cover gets in the way, remove the dust cover. We don't want to damage that. So begin by pressing this thing through the bottom, because remember, we pressed this down and out to remove it, so we're going to have to press it up and in to put it back in. We're going to stick this in here first, up in there carefully, just like that. You can put this in here like that. Slip this bad boy in there. Want to double check, make sure that the ball joint isn't going to be hitting the sleeve while it's going up. Now, it's time to start pressing this thing in. Make sure it's nice and tight. There we go. First ball joint is officially in. So with this top ball joint, doesn't matter what way it goes in, the fitting is just going to go straight up, so that doesn't really matter. Once again, we want to grease our piece, make sure it has nice lubricated entrance. This one actually came pre-greased. There's quite a bit of grease on this bit right here, so we're just going to stick that in. Remember how this one was up and out to take it out? This one's going to be down and in to put this one in. We're going to have the same old receiving tube that we've been using this whole time. Put that on top. Make sure it's flush with this little flange that's on the outside. We're going to use this piece right here, and this piece is unique. This side right here is taller than this other side, which is 180 degrees round, and that's because this piece right here, it's kind of tapered down, so we want to have the tall side on the outside. That way when we put the C-clamp on there, it'll position itself more upright with the ball joint, instead of being all off camber and kind of wonky and whatnot. So we're going to put this together just like that, up and in. Try our darnest to make this thing fit. There we go. Kind of a tight squeeze. Make sure everything's aligned just right. And now start pressing it in. Okay, so now that ball joint's completely in. Make sure it's flush against the axle all the way around. Make sure it's completely in. And if it is, then congrats, you just replaced some ball joints. At this point, since it's nice and open, don't forget to put your grease fittings on. God forbid if your balls go dry, then you'll be doing this job all over again. So now that everything is in, we can start putting things back together. So put the steering knuckle back in. Make sure to use the new hardware that comes with. You want to be sure to torque the knuckle bolts 75 pounds. And of course, can't forget these cotter pins. Alright, now that we got the knuckle back on, we can take our axle shaft, stick it back in. We got to make sure, try and keep it off of the axle tube. I'm going to try and just put all the way into the differential without touching anything. I can already feel it touching something, because The axle tube is a dirty place. We don't want to put dirt in the pumpkin. So now, as you can see, it is now in. Next up, we got the hub. You want to maybe put a little bit of grease on these splines right here, just because we can. Put this sucker in here. Make sure the bolt holes line up just like that. There we go. Then we got to put those 3 special bolts back in. We want to torque our special bolts to 75 pounds as well. Alright, now we can put the brake disc back on and put our caliper back on with shiny brand new brake pads. Put in the 2 screws that mount the caliper to the knuckle, and then look around aimlessly trying to figure out what you did with that 13mm socket. But hey, at least I still have my 10mm socket. Need to evacuate a little passenger. Come on. There we go. Boing. You can go over there. Now we can put our wheel back on. The wheel that weighs freaking 100 pounds. Yeah. Lower the vehicle to the ground. And last but not least, reinstall your axle nut. And torquing it down to 175 pounds. Reinstall your little castle nut looking cap and put in your imaginary cotter pin, because I forgot to get new cotter pins for this, and you are done. Congrats, you just installed a whole new set of ball joints.